Okay, so here we are on my first podcast with my first guest who doesn't really need a introduction. Brian, everybody knows who you are in the skydiving world, but why don't you go ahead and just give us a little bit of a background, what you've been doing, how you started, things like that.
Sure. Well, I've been jumping for 38 years. Started in Malone, New York in 1986. So this is my 38th year now. And I don't know how many jumps I have, but it's a lot. It's a lot. It's thousands, many thousands, more than certainly well over 10,000. But it doesn't matter. You know, that's from my perspective. Your logbook doesn't save you. It's you're paying attention to what's going on right now. You know, the little details.
Absolutely.
Complacency can come from ego. And I teach a lot. So my focus for a long time has been on parachute flight, because before that, of course, like everybody else, that goes into the industry side, I did a lot of tandems, I did a lot of AFF, a lot of static line instruction. Starting when I was 19, I was teaching for first jump courses. Back in those days, you could get a jump master rating and they'd let you teach the class as long as you were, quote, under supervision. So I was just a kid, and that was great. I love it. I still love it. Yeah. However, then I was like, oh, well, the free flying thing came in, and I was part of the kind of ground floor of that stuff. And so I was touring, all over the place teaching free fly seminars, because people didn't know how to do it. People didn't know how. I competed in the X Games. I was very successful and, winning medals of all colors, including gold of it. I've also won fourth, where you don't get anything. But that led to loads of opportunities, where people wanted to know how to do it. Maybe they try something they saw on ESPN and like spin out of control and, get all loppy jarred, and they saw the value of instruction. So,
I see.
So that was kind of the beginning. Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, like, what made you jump? Like, what was going through your head on that first jump? What made you even go in and jump?
Yeah, well, at that point, I was an Air Force ROTC cadet, right? I was going to be a pilot. I wanted to fly the space shuttle. And I figured this would be good on my resume, and it was always my dream. I always wanted to, like the swing set when I was a kid, kindergarten. I was constantly getting in trouble for jumping off the swing set. They called it the parachute game.
Wow.
That was my name for it, the parachute game. So I was kind of made for this, I suppose. And so as a result, freshman year of college at University of Vermont, my RA, my resident assistant in the dorms, said, hey, we're going to do a group activity. And I've got 18 skydives. His grandfather is one of the founding fathers of the sport.
Wow.
And he said, yeah, we're going to just, as many as want to come, we're going to teach a first jump course first here in the dorm. Dick Swanson, Mike's dad, came to the dorm and taught a first jump course, and we finished it up at the drop zone in Malone, New York. And I was hooked immediately. I didn't have a tremendous fear response personally. I remember being exhilarated but focused. Let's do it right. I wanted to be flawless. And I had, perfect arch on the static line exit, round parachute, belly mount reserve. This was the 80s, man. It was,
wow.
Yeah, there was no such thing as AFF, or at least not in our neck of the woods.
So the wind kind of takes you where it takes you?
Well, a little. you've got maybe 7 mile an hour forward speed on a round. If it's a modified round, which means basically you cut holes in the back of the round parachute so it drives forward. There's 2 slots on the round that are missing panels. And so if I pull down on the right rear riser, it kind of closes up that vent. In some cases, there was actually wooden toggles that you would unstow from these elastic keepers. And that wooden toggle, like a toggle clasp on your clothing, that's why we call them toggles. It was just a wooden dowel with a hole drilled through it, and you tie a knot on the end, right? And so that would close up a vent and cause, a yaw from the adverse throw.
Wow.
Right? Unbalanced.
I did not know that.
So you can change your heading. You can land more or less where you want to, or at least on the correct airport.
Okay.
If the spot is good. If the spot is good. But back in those days, we used to throw wind drifts. Have you ever seen a wind drift?
What's a wind drift?
It's a 20-foot long piece of yellow crepe paper. Yellow shows up really well at a distance with a green background.
Right.
And you'd put a weight in the end. You know, we would eventually we moved to sand and that sort of things, but we used to do it with just a steel rod that you'd duct tape it inside the bottom. Then you'd roll the whole thing up and you throw it out of the airplane at 1,500 feet and just see where it drifted to based on where you threw it. And that would help you to transpose that line to the spot. And that really helps. When you know, because you're just the dust ball floating in the wind, pretty much. You know, with some limited capabilities of maneuvering.
Right. I've seen some videos of rounds that they just end up over trees or just on a building or something, and it feels like from the video it looks like they can't really do much about it. It's like they're just going there.
Yeah, there is an element of that, yes, but you have a little bit of control, and the main control is spotting. You know, that you just do your very best to get out at the right time. And of course, with static line students, they don't always leave when they're told to leave. So you get a lot of, turning the airplane so that you don't get too far from the airport and deliberately adding G's with back pressure and power so that their hands slip off. Because, in those days, we would do hanging exits. So you'd climb out on the strut of the Cessna as a student, your first jump, and you're hanging from your hands, no feet at all. And, of course, part of that was it increases the likelihood of a stable exit, but it also makes it easy for us to pull some G's and drop you off of there because you can't hang on very long in most cases.
I see.
But yeah, it worked. 2,800 feet was the standard exit altitude. No AADs, belly mount reserve. Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
I can say I've only seen those in videos. It sounds exciting to try it, but I don't know if I would, to be honest.
Well, what about water? Would you jump into water?
Into water with a round parachute?
Yeah.
I guess. I mean, I've always wanted to actually do the jump at the Blue Hole in Belize where you actually skydive and land in the water.
Sure.
So I guess it'd be interesting. I don't know. I think it's one of those things maybe I should try. I mean,
coming up early part of this summer, Malone Parachute Club, where I started, is now called Skydive Vermont, is hosting their annual water jumps. And we've got all kinds. We got T10s and we got, the old rounds. We have para commanders, the more advanced rounds, all kinds of weird stuff to jump.
That sounds like fun. I mean, it would definitely be a different experience. I think I would be more nervous doing a static with a round static jump. Something I've never done before. Yep. Even though I've jumped a lot with my regular parachute.
Yep. Yeah, I get that. But is being scared a reason to not do it? Or is
of course not.
If there's a logical reason, absolutely, right? It's too windy or something like that. But if you go down the list and say, all right, well, I've reviewed my reserve procedures, which are now different, right? Pull and punch on the belly mount reserve. I've reviewed, all the details of the gear. I know what I'm getting into. I know what the risks are, which is, round parachutes open with a much higher frequency than squares do.
Okay.
Right? So you have a lower chance of malfunction. And if you get a good spot, you're guaranteed to land in the lake.
Wow.
Lake Champlain, can't miss it. It's big.
Sounds good. I may have to try it. I mean, I'm actually getting excited thinking about it. It's something new. After jumping for so long, you kind of don't get that high anymore. Like, unless you stay away for like a couple of months and then go back in, then you start feeling it. I remember leaving the drop zone one day and I hadn't jumped in 2 months. And my Apple Watch always tells me my heart rate, and it was down to 60. I was like, it's never down to 60.
Yes.
I was so relaxed. From jump.
Yeah, there was an Italian study that showed that highly experienced skydivers, when we leave the airplane, the heart rate drops and so does the blood pressure. Wow. We're actually relaxing completely as we leave the plane because the exit isn't dangerous. I mean,
exactly. My biggest thought is the exit, the only reason it would be dangerous, not really dangerous, but I don't want to look like an idiot when I exit, especially if I'm jumping with others. It's like, that's the biggest thing going through my head at that time. It's like, don't fuck this up. Don't fuck this up. Don't be the guy.
Don't be that guy. Yeah, exactly. And we don't discern in our base mind, our old brain structures, We don't
Yeah.
discern between performance anxiety and fear of death and dismemberment. Right?
Right.
It's the same thing in that part of the brain. It's just an alarm.
Right. Right.
Which means that we shouldn't belittle it when somebody's having, a bit of stage fright about exiting last on a 20-way or something. They're going through something very real, and we have to address it in the same way as if it was a physical risk, like a base jump or something.
Right.
You breathe slower, you calm your body, you relax your muscles, you focus your visualization on what you want and not what you don't want, again and again and again.
Yeah, we got a visitor here. One of my cats jumped up. I knew that at least one will jump up, but he's doing his thing on the table, which is fine.
Do you have? Does he have a skydiver name like Ripcord or Toggle? Or?
No, his name is Prince Cheetah.
Prince Cheetah. Well, that's cute. That's very cute.
Yeah, yeah. So actually, let me ask you. I mean, you have so many good stories. Is there one that sticks out to you the most that you like telling?
There's tons of them. Oh my God. I mean, a lot of the best stories are either, for me, the in-hops that we do in Europe. So Northern Europe, the Scandinavians in particular have pioneered something called the in-hop. Evan Rohni is a Norwegian guy who still does it, mostly in Africa these days, but you jump into new places.
Yeah.
So I've done some really incredible ones. I'm leaving on the 19th to go back over to Norway again for my 18th trip.
Wow.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you, Scandinavians, for paving the way for me to be able to do that, because I would never be able to afford it. But they pay my way, and I teach. Canopy.
That's awesome. So I mean, you're living a dream. You're doing what you love and teaching others.
Well, it's sporadically living the dream, and in between, it's a lot of sewing, a lot of Zooming.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I get to go do what I love so much. But all of it is part of the same thing.
Right.
When I'm just unpicking a bunch of stitches, I can't let myself get grumbly because I'm making a parachute.
Yeah.
That's exciting and fun, and it has value.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you, I guess I'm called that skydive sim guy.
Yeah.
And actually, let me tell you how I came up with the name for the podcast. A couple of years ago, I was jumping, I was getting geared up, and this one guy next to me, he just looked at me. He goes, "Aren't you that skydive sim guy?" I was like, yeah, I guess you could say that.
That's me.
And it never registered to me until recently when I wanted to come up with a name for a podcast. And I figured probably a lot of people think of me as that skydive sim guy. So why not? Let's call it that.
That'll do.
Yeah.
What you've created is freaking amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, tell me. I know I reached out to you a while back, and you actually were able to test out the very first version of it. Which we agree it sucked, but it had potential. It's one of those things that we're trying to build. It's never been done. I mean, it's been done, but it's a process. We're trying to make something from the real world to react the same way in a digital world.
It's extremely challenging.
So tell me what your thoughts were.
Well, I mean, my first thought was, all right, this is going to mess people up. That was my first. I'll be straight up. This is because, like, if you visualize wrong, right? Because the physics aren't congruent with reality. Now you're training incorrectly. So that was my first thought was maybe okay for non-skydivers, but for skydivers, I think they should lay off.
Right.
And as you continue to be so responsive to, it needs to better glide, it needs a longer recovery arc, the flare response needs to pitch and things like that. You did solve like all the problems. Every time I come up with a new issue that needs to be resolved, you do it. You
and it's great to have someone with your experience give me that kind of feedback, because I'm so close to the project that it's really hard to see sometimes. Sometimes when you're just right in something, you miss things. You have to step back, or you have to listen to others that aren't as close to it, and you got to just kind of crush your ego and say, hey, they're right. You don't just say, no, I know what I'm doing and I'm right. So that's the big thing, I think.
That is the big thing. Yeah, to be able to just keep your ears open, because the goal is to make it better, not to defend your turf. Right. Not to defend your fragile ego or anything like that. And
exactly.
you've done a great job. You really have.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think as a visualization now, it offers so much. I mean, yes, for the intro folks that are considering skydiving, the kids that, maybe when they grow up, they're going to be
Right.
jumpers. Some of these guys may end up in the military. Some of them may end up as civilian TIs or something like that. But it really has come so far that I recommend it for skydivers as well.
And that means a lot coming with someone with so much experience to say, I recommend it. I saw one of your posts that said, I think this can help skydivers.
Yeah.
And I mean, it really made my day when I saw that, because we hadn't talked about it. You just happened to post that.
Yep. Yeah,
And
it's
I was
authentic.
just
It's
like,
authentic.
blown away.
Yeah, this is it's a visualization, right? I mean, that's one of the things that in our sport we really rely on, because unlike a tennis player that can whack that ball 1,000 times a day, you don't get to flare 1,000 times a day. You don't get to arch 1,000 times a day or track. And so here, this gives us, sort of a clear mind movie that is relatively accurate, clear enough that when you take the goggles off, you feel like you just made a jump.
Right. You said somebody recently did that, right?
Sure.
They took the goggles off and were like, wow.
Holy cow, they're like sweating, most of them, they're like still, the adrenaline is elevated and they're all excited. And of course, some of them take the goggles off and they're sick. And that's something
that's
that
for
you
sure.
just have
It's
to
VR.
deal with. And that's just VR. It's a certain percentage. Some say 20% or something like that. We'll have that sort of disconnect, I think, is because when you see the world change in a certain way and your middle ear doesn't feel it, now there's another incongruity that's, like...
For sure. And, we've actually come up with a solution for it. There's a FOV limiter, which is field of view limiter, that as you speed up in the game, like once you jump and you're in free fall or you're under canopy and you give it more input to turn, it kind of darkens the edges. Your peripheral vision gets darker. So your brain is not thinking, oh, I'm turning this way, I'm turning that way. And it seems to help a lot with that.
Absolutely. The brain does it anyway.
Yeah.
Right? This is something that we naturally do anyway. We're just less aware of our surroundings, which has pros and cons, right? I mean, if somebody doesn't look before they turn and they don't point their focal point into this new direction of motion, they're not aware that there's a canopy right next to them before they make the turn.
Right.
The tunnel vision,
I've seen people walking, like I was biking one time, and I kind of predict things just naturally. It's like I saw somebody getting out of her car, closing the door and just turning and walking into the street. And luckily for her, I was anticipating it. I'm on a bike, so bicycle, it's not going to hurt her. But that could have been a car coming at her. But, just not looking, I think we just kind of automate a lot of things that way.
Everybody does, when we're kind of inside of our heads instead of out in the world. We narrow our field of view in many ways. And so, I think this is it was a natural step as an option to have that FOV limiter. I think it's a great idea. I don't feel like I need it.
You've been in VR, and actually you've worked with different skydiving simulators.
Yes, well, the first
for
one,
a long time.
Yeah, the first one I did was in Norway. My friend Helge at the Oppdal Club, up near, it's kind of in the Trondheim area of Norway. He actually created his own years ago, and they use it for student training. And it doesn't look fancy. The canopy looks sort of square, and the way the control surfaces move is just a plane. But it does the job of helping people to picture the three-dimensional reality. We live in 2D, mostly. And so to help somebody to see the flow of motion when your glide ratio is this, or if there's more wind as you face into the wind, the glide ratio is steeper. They get to actually see that and feel it, and that's very helpful. That was the first one, and I don't know if they're still using it, probably. And
how long ago was that?
Oh, that was, we're talking about 2013 or something. It's quite a while.
Wow. Over 10 years ago, over a decade ago. So technology has changed so much.
It has.
To build something like that back then is actually a big deal.
Yes. Yeah. And I think he had already been working on it, and it was still, it was crashing all the time, and all that, but it was a mind blower, and I got my kids on there that long ago, and my kids were flying to parachutes and, getting a feel for it. And that was wonderful for their training. But then Ronnie, was working with a few partners, Ronnie Hewen, to make Skydive VR. which
Right.
I mean, it's great for as an instructor. I love it. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Because you can do route planning, right? So you can draw the pattern. Here's the holding area. Here's the wind line. And you can really get into those details. So for a drop zone, I would say use both. They both offer your thing offers this full immersion experience. You get the free fall and turn, switch to a sit, track all that, the malfunction stuff. None of that is there in the Skydive VR. However, that one has some pretty cool benefits.
Teaching benefits
for an AFF
sure.
instructor or static line instructor, for those that are still doing it, to help people to see it, to feel it. And he's got all the drop zones, or not all, but he's got a lot of drop zones in there, which I'm thrilled that you're starting to do now too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, talking to the drop zones and see if they're interested to put them in. The response has been good. I think a lot of people like the idea of being able to teach, or at least kind of visualize. I think that's what it's really good for. If you have your drop zone in there, you can help the student visualize it. Because I remember when I was in AFF, my instructors would tell me, close your eyes, especially on the plane, close your eyes and visualize the jump, the complete jump. And to be able to put that, I think that's still actually important to do. But to be able to, in a relaxed environment, have the goggles on and say, okay, go through this path and visualize everything. Yeah. I think it does relax you more. Yep. Knowing that you've done this.
Yes. Agreed. And I think it would be really advantageous to add to the experience somebody on your shoulder that knows what they're doing, where they can see where you're flying and remind you, hey, you're getting a little downwind. You might want to turn back into the wind, where they can give you those tips and remind you to breathe.
You mean like the instructor be able to kind of see it as they're going? I think that's a great idea.
Where they can cast it. Yeah, because they can cast the image up onto a big screen or just a phone. That's what I usually use.
Yeah.
And just remind
and you just kind of give them live feedback like that?
Yeah, just sort of like you're talking them down. If somebody's doing something they shouldn't be doing, you got to let them know right there. If they're turning the parachute with only their toggles, right, which is the only thing that actually works in the simulator at this point.
Right.
Lean on a butt cheek, right? Use your body as you're making the turn, so you're developing the correct muscle memory. This is what the coach is for.
Yeah, and definitely. I mean, I use my body when I'm at body harness turns a lot when I'm there. And I catch myself doing it actually while I'm in the sim too. But I know it doesn't do anything, but it's just you automatically kind of move that direction. Yeah. Down the road, once we add maybe a full-blown setup to where you can give harness inputs, I think that would be just amazing.
It'd be the bomb. Yeah. To be able to add it. And you throw a blower fan into it, it helps. For the realism, but it also helps to keep the goggles from fogging up.
I mean, this thing, VR's been coming around. It's funny. The other night I was watching The Lawnmower Man. Have you seen that?
I think 1994 remember that. It was a long time ago,
And I mean, in the very beginning of it, I thought it was really cool because they had this super on there that said, in the future, virtual reality will become real, blah, blah, blah. And they were talking about it. And I was like, man, they really had the vision because now we are here. Like,
it's the holodeck.
So much further with it. Down the road, it can be a holodeck for sure. It's, Well,
eventually, I think that's going to be very nice, to have projectors.
Right.
But for right now, this is phenomenal. For what we have it is, there's absolutely no reason not to use it,
And what we also have, I mean, I've seen one person that sent me a video, actually. It was interesting because they actually had the thing that you walk on. So he was kind of like doing the walking, because in the game you can actually walk around if you want to, but a lot of people don't have the room. But he had the treadmill for VR where he was walking. And then when he was in free fall, he actually let himself be in the horizontal position, just kind of hanging. And I thought that was super cool, And more and more of those things are coming out. It's just amazing.
Yeah, multiple sensors and things like that. That's all going to happen for sure. I mean,
definitely.
Why wouldn't it? But it's still, I feel like it's come far enough that we don't need those things for this to be valuable. just as it is, without any changes at all, drop zones can really help their students to be able to see it, give them multiple scenarios, like a bad spot where you can't make it back, and you've got a malfunction, now you got to cut it away, and how to stay calm in that really interesting new situation as you cut away and dump your reserve. The first time my kid, it was my 14-year-old, had a malfunction, I told him, if you switch to a sit and then pull, your parachute's going to definitely have a malfunction. And he did that. I was like, oh, you got a mal. And so here's what you need to do. And I started to talk him through it. He's like, I already dealt with it. Like, just from being in the drop zone, he cut away and dumped his reserve all on his own. I was so proud.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I mean, we got line twists coming up, actually. I just got the model in for that. So
Great.
We're going to be adding pretty much every malfunction in there, so you kind of get used to dealing with it. I mean, line twists, really, I've had a lot of them.
Yep.
I never really cut them away. I was high enough.
Well, and I think that's important. As soon as you said line twist, I was thinking, well, that is a malfunction if it doesn't come out. But most of the time, you can get out of your line. You can
get out of it, but it's the most common one, right? I mean, everybody gets line twists.
Yeah. It's more of a minor inconvenience if you pull high and you have a plan. The method of getting out. There's lots to talk about there for sure, but I can refer you guys to some of my other videos, like the salmon.
Yeah, for sure.
Salmon untwist method and things like that. But I think it would be great if the simulator not only offered the line twists, but some line twists that come out after 5 seconds and some that don't.
You can try to spin yourself out. Yeah. And also, I mean, there's one line twist that's definitely dangerous if you're somewhat horizontal and spinning, which you're basically diving towards the ground at that point. So
a lot of
most cases,
descent rate can approach free fall speed, and the G forces can be pretty brutal.
Yeah.
Having spun under, cross brace canopies like that for very, very long periods of time in test flight, it is dangerous. And
for sure.
And so maybe even adding, if you have a line twist spinning malfunction in the simulator where everything starts to get red and grays out and pixelates, simulating, G-lock, if you will.
Yeah, we probably have to do that. Otherwise, if they're just spinning in VR like that, I think we'll have a lot of sick people, right? They'll be like,
that's true too, right? To add your tunnel vision thing automatically in the spinner, because that can happen. It hasn't to me. I mean, I've been in, very high G spins for up to 80 seconds under a high parachute. I mean, granted, I'm maybe, more able to handle it than some people. I don't know. But I never.
Well, I'm sure you get used to it, right? I mean, it's one of those things that you get used to. I remember my very first wingsuit jump.
Yep.
And I mean, I haven't done many of them. It's just very hot where I live. And I tried it out, like did 3 jumps in one day in middle of summer in Houston. Man, and I also don't like the feeling of being confined. But I remember my very first one, I was basically a piece of paper out the plane door.
A spinner,
Until, I mean, like maybe about 5 to 10 seconds until I got it under control. Yeah, exactly.
Drive out of it, right? Fly forward out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Use your legs. But it's normal to have one of those at some point. But once you get the hang of wingsuiting, it's not an issue.
By my third one that day, I was actually feeling like I'm behind. I'm in an airplane. It's like there was a small puff of cloud that I'm just flying slowly past, and it was amazing. But it's one of those things. It's just another skill.
It's another skill that can be taught in Skydive Sim to a certain degree now that you've got tracking. I mean, by the time this comes out, you may have made that even better with the ability to turn while we're tracking.
Right.
That's not so simple, I understand. But But in the meantime, at least we can go straight and experience, you're not only noticing where you're going, but where are you, right? And pattern planning as you do a tracking dive. You want to end up, off of the jump run, but upwind, ideally.
Right.
And so that pattern planning is vital for wingsuiting and tracking jumps.
Right. Yeah. So real quick, I want to ask you this because it really, we were talking, I think, last week about getting ready for this podcast, and you mentioned something about Was it the Polish army that you found out used
Yep.
skydive sim?
Yeah.
Can you tell that story? Because you were actually in Europe for...
Yeah, it was, well, I mean, I had my little simulator booth, right? I was giving some talks. I gave a keynote talk for I was the first keynote speaker, the only one that addressed like everybody, 700 people. It was quite a crowd.
Wow.
And I was focused.
And this was at the skydiving symposium.
This was in Poland. But people from all over the world came. A lot of military. I would say it was about 50-50 civilian and military.
Big convention.
It was huge. Yeah, it was huge. So I gave my talk on the holistic approach to safety in my keynote. And one of the things I included is, the visualization technologies that are available. And I showed some videos, and then I had the booth, come on over. And I had, people on the goggles. I had 3 sets of VR going, and so they could try Skydive VR because it has several positive aspects, and try Skydive Sim as well. And I wasn't trying to get them, to be married to either one of them. I think they both have value, and I think we need both.
Exactly.
I think we need both.
Yeah, definitely.
But I was amazed that they had VR sets next to me at the, I don't know if it was like Special Forces booth or something for the Polish military. And those guys didn't speak a lot of English. They're all in uniform, and they have these big guns. And anybody that knows me, I'm not really into guns. But they got all these guns right next to me. And I'm like, all right, I really wish I could, put a little pink blanket over those. I don't want to look at that, but whatever, it's fine. So I said, so what's with the Sims that you got there? They had a bunch of Quest 2s. They said, oh, well, we use it for various things. It took me a while to get it out of them, but they use it for skydive simulation. And I said, which one are you using? Well, we're using that Skydive Sim.
Wow.
For the military. We're using it for helping, train them, because they don't all jump around parachutes, right? I mean, that has a specific function in the military to put people out of the plane, lots of them at low altitude.
Right.
But it's obviously, if you've got a smaller group that has more training, there's a lot of advantage to having a gliding parachute that flares.
Exactly. So you can really get into a tight spot. Like if you want to penetrate a spot, you can fly a parachute right in.
Yeah, and keep your aircraft out of harm's way, away from the flak and the SAMs and all that.
Yeah. So here's my other cat.
There's a lot. There's the other one. Hey, little guy.
They are making their appearances.
Yes.
This is Audrey Catburn.
Audrey, you got great names.
Yeah.
Nice. So I was really excited to hear that those guys were using it, and I got a bunch of other sort of high profile people. The head of the Israeli Defense Force Special Forces guys, the parachute jump leader guy, got him to fly the sim. We had a lot of fun. Wow. I got the head of the Netherlands Special Forces to check it out, and it was just one after the other. I was very.
That's pretty amazing that they're open to it too.
They are. Well, they get it. They understand that you only have so much at your disposal to train these guys, and when they're in the situation, either they have the skills or bad things happen.
Right.
And so this helps them to sort of pave the way and fill in the blanks, right? Because when I draw, because I teach a lot of Canopy courses, right?
Yes, you do.
That's an understatement.
Yes.
And when I draw on the board, big dry erase board, I draw a triangle that says this is your glide ratio. And then I draw a vector onto that, say this is the wind, and a tailwind or a headwind and that kind of thing. It's two-dimensional. It's static. It's just a snapshot of a moment. But when you put on the sim, you get to experience it in a flowing way where time is moving forward, and you get to see the rate of change, the direction of motion, and the effects to your inputs in terms of heading change and braking and things like that. It really is, I think, it's a significant advantage for your students. And if you really care about them, for me as an instructor, I love every one of my students. Even the ones that are hard to love. And I want to protect them in every way I can. Why not do more? Why not continue to go back in that place of wonder, that doesn't know everything, and say, well, what else could I do? What haven't I thought of? What about a swing set? I do a lot. I got a swing set where we can spin.
I've seen the video. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
There's a lot of really helpful things, and this is one of the most powerful tools that I've seen for helping them with their visualizations.
That's great to hear. You know, we could talk for a long time, but we should probably cut it short. Maybe we can bring you back on another time
Sure.
again, because I always enjoy talking to you.
Yeah,
Even when we talk on the phone, you and I tend to just continue talking about this stuff.
Yeah, there's
It's
a lot
really
to talk
great.
about. Oh, just wait till you get me started on stories. I was really,
I
I tried
definitely
very
want to.
hard. You're like, I tell some stories. Like, no, I don't think you want me to tell stories. I get too many.
I don't know. I find it very interesting. Like, I remember when I started skydiving, I was introduced to your videos by some of my instructors, and I think it's the same for a lot of people. So
That's good.
you definitely have made a huge impact on the sport.
Yeah,
So
that's what I'm
I
trying.
really appreciate you. You know, I think there's a lot of people out there that appreciate what you've done for the sport, and that should be said.
I will continue to do so until I can't do it anymore.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining, and
All right. Thanks, Amir.
talk to you later.
All right. Enjoy your day.